Om Yonda Pravishya Vachimimam Prasuptam Sanjeevayadi Akhila Shakti Dharasudhamna Anyamscha Hastacharana Sravanatvagadin Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharma Surupini Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna-Vivekananda Te Namaha Sudismati Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. Thank you for the introduction, Swami Vivekananda ji. It is a matter of immense pleasure and a feeling of infinite blessedness, because this is in a way my spiritual alma mater, where I joined as a young brahmachari maybe about 40 years ago, or even earlier. And this place in a way reverberates with my own memories as I entered the premises as a young novice at the time when Swami, revered Swami Tattwamayananda was the president of this ashram. And many of our monks here, including the head of the center of this Ramakrishna Math and many others are very closely associated with Swamiji, and it's a matter of great joy and pleasure and privilege for me to be back here, my spiritual alma mater. The subject is very interesting. Traditionally, all these years, I was mostly engaged in dealing with Vedanta scriptures, including some Vakyarthas elsewhere in northern parts of India. The central theme of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Jiva Brahma Hivanapara. The second preposition of this dictum, Brahma Satyam, is nothing but the art of practical application of Brahma Satyam. Jagat Mithya is the practical application of Brahma Satyam. Swami Vivekananda mentions once, the world is a gymnasium for us to work out our karmas. A gymnasium is not a place where we live in. It's a place where we go to do some work and exercise and then come back after some hours. So this world is a play for us. A gymnasium. What's the difference between a play and work? When we play, we don't feel exhausted. We don't feel tired. We won't feel any kind of fatigue. Because when we play, we let off the steam and there is no deliberate exertion, plans or schemes behind play. If life also can be a play, in fact, that is what is the implication of Jagat Mithya. The word Mithya is traditionally interpreted by the great Advaitins of the Vivarana Prasthana, beginning with Panchapadya, that is Patnapada, Panchapadya Vivarana, Prakashatmayadi, then Chitsuki, Tattva Pradipika by Sugacharya, and also Nyaya Deepavali by Ananda Bodha. So, Sadasatta Nadigarnatva Mithyatvam. Sadasatta Nadigarnatvam. That is one definition of Mithyat. Panchapadya. Then, Pratipanno Badhu Traikalika Nisheta Pradiyogitvam Va Mithyatvam. That is Panchapadya Vivarana Prakashatmayadi. Jnana Nivartitvam Va Mithyatvam. That is again Prakashatmayadi Panchapadya Vivarana. Swasraya Nishtha Atyanta Abhava Pradiyogitvam Va Mithyatvam. That is Chitsuki. And Sat Viviktatvam Va Mithyatvam in Nyaya Deepavali by Ananda Bodha. Now, what is the actual definition of Mithyasm in our everyday life? Mithya is something that actually exists, but no, really doesn't exist. Like Maya. Ma is a kind of negative preposition, not a preposition, but when ma gachadu, ma vadadu, ma gachadu means don't go there, don't come there, don't speak. It's in that sense. It means a negation. Ya is a pronoun that we use when we refer to something that we can point our fingers. So it is in a way a combination of yes and no. So this world is real, but not absolutely real. So if we can apply this in our everyday life, for example, you get a notice from your doctor, unfortunately, let's God forbid, but still if it happens, suppose we have cancer, serious health problem. Well, it may shatter us, our mind, it may be a disaster. It can give a lot of anxiety, worry, and a lot of problems. Now, if we can face the problem with a smile, that is what Mithyatva actually means. Mithyatva means that is something simply changes. See, if our healthy condition is changing to an unhealthy condition, which is what disease means, it is Mithya. Very often in our life, we forget that when we are unhappy, that unhappiness also may one day change and we may again be happy. That we forget. So, the real meaning of Mithyatva is simple common sense. What we know, what every kindergarten child knows, that the world is going to change, everything is changing, the world never remains stagnant or stable all the time. This we all know philosophically, but we are not able to apply it in our everyday life. Everyone knows that body changes. Charaka Samhita defines physical health. Samadosha Samanishcha Samadhatu Malakriya. Then the same Charaka Samhita defines mental health. Prasannatmendriya Managa Sostha iti abhidhiyate. So what is the real state of health? A healthy minded person is somebody whose prasanna atmendriya manaha. Atma means body here, because Ayurvedic scholars, Ayurvedic school, Atma means body, mind and senses. When they are in perfect harmony, that is called mental or psychological healthy mindedness. If we can keep in our mind that everything in this world, our body, all that we experience, physically, mentally, intellectually, is going to change, not going to remain the same for all times. This is great simple common sense. Advaita or Vedanta in general is simple common sense. What is common sense? Something that we already know, but we are not able to apply in our everyday life. That is common sense actually. Now, in our Hindu tradition, Vedantic tradition, we have the great lineage or heritage of great men and women who practice this common sense. Sometimes they call Rajarshis. In Plato's Republic, called the philosopher kings. They didn't have a spiritual element in their concept of a philosopher king in the Plato's Republic. But in Indian tradition, a philosopher king is called a Rajarshi. Rajanascha Risheha Rajarsheha, according to Shankaracharya. Who is a Rajarshi? Rajarshi is perhaps the best example, the best illustration of actual application of Vedanta in our everyday life. Not only in our individual life, family life, even statecraft, real politics, even running a country in administration, we can use this simple common sense. So, Rajatvam Aishwarya Sambatti, Rishitvam Tasyaha Sukshmartha Darsana Kshamatvam. This is Shankarananda Saraswati, a small tiga based on Shankara Bhashya. Rajatvam Aishwarya Sambatti. A king or an administrator is symbolic of prosperity, wealth, power, dynamism, efficiency, action, success. And what is Rishitvam? Risheha Drashtaraha, those who see the reality beyond, not mantra drashtaraha or drashtaraha, mean mantra drashtara in Vedic tradition. Rishi is a person who can see far into future and deep into the reality. So Rishi can, of course, he understands the meaning and the necessity for wealth, but he also understands the limitation of wealth. So tasyaha sukshmartha dasana kshamatvam means Aishwarya Sampatyaha Sukshmartha Dasana Kshamatvam. Understanding the subtle reality behind prosperity. What's the reality behind prosperity? Prosperity may one day become poverty. Success is followed by failure. Failure is followed by success. A billionaire, a trillionaire may lose his sleep if he gets information that he has lost just $1,000 in stock markets. He has absolutely no reason, he is absolutely stupid to lose sleep if a billionaire loses sleep just because he loses $1,000 in stock markets. But it happens. Why? He doesn't realize, he doesn't keep in mind. He may know actually that money is not going to remain stable, but he forgets that fact in actual life. When information comes, he has lost $1,000, he loses his sleep. So a Rishi is a person, a Rajarshi is a person who can apply this simple common sense of Vedanta in his everyday life. Now this has been explained in so many different ways. Mahabharata, Viduravakya is a great source of this great wisdom, but more importantly the Bhagavad Gita. So Lord Krishna explains this. How does a person keep stability of mind, even in the face of problems? The mechanism that Gita prescribes is this kind of detachment or non-attachment. And this is being used, this is being explained in so many different ways. So dharma, so karma, karma yoga, karma nishtha, and so on. In the Gita there is a verse, Saktaha karmani avidvamso yatha kurvanti bharata kuryan vidwan tasa asaktaha chikishuhu lokasagraham. So here is a person who is successful like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett or Henry Ford, billions of dollars, successful, running big companies, multinationals, but can't get sleep without taking four pills every day. Anxiety, worry, complaint, bitterness, because every little bit of negative or drawback or setback in life is a big shock for him. The another person, Saktaha karmani avidvamsaha, somebody who doesn't know the wisdom of non-attachment or detachment, who doesn't know this mechanism of karma yoga, this mechanism of using wisdom in real life, Vedantic wisdom. Saktaha karmanya vidvamso yadha kurvanti bhara kuryan vidwan tatha asaktaha chikishuhu loka sangraham. Tatha, the successful man who is working hard, with full of greed and anxiety and worry, is very efficient, very active, very diligent, and hyperactive. Well, similarly, with the same enthusiasm, efficiency, and application, sincerity, the other person, Kuryan Vidwan Tatha Asaktaha, Tatha I mentioned, with the same enthusiasm, Vidwan, the intelligent man, the man who uses Vedantic intelligence or wisdom in real life, he works with the same efficiency, but he can smile when there is a problem. He can restrain himself when there is a problem. This is Vedantic wisdom. Understanding the limitation of everything, at the same time absorbing it, remaining calm and quiet in good and bad, success and failure. Now Vedanta has got another very important practical application. It can turn your mind into a friend. Now the best friend that we can ever claim in our life is not our next door neighbor, but our own mind. A person whose mind is not friendly with him, he can never make any progress in life. Because one way modern psychologists try to understand, interpret, when they talk about mindfulness, a friendly mind. Suppose you take a decision to do something good. Tomorrow onwards you go for a walk every day because the doctor has told you. And when the exact day and time comes, suppose maybe tomorrow onwards I start going for an exercise. So anything that we have to do that is actually good for us, when we try to do, our own mind doesn't cooperate. Our own mind creates a stumbling block. Such a mind is not our best friend. Now, a mind that's our enemy is a mind that encourages when we to do something negative. So we try to meditate, and at that time our mind is creating problems, internal problems, conflicts and anxieties, and we want to come out of the meditation seat. When we switch on the TV, mind is very happy. When you try to meditate, mind is unhappy. It creates conflicts. So Vedanta tells us that the best way, the best use of Vedantic wisdom is to turn our mind into a best friend. For Vedanta, making a clue from Karma Yoga, it's a very interesting suggestion is given here. When we do something, any activity for the matter, physical activity or mental activity, it generates some invisible result. We call adrishtam apurvam in the Purvamimamsa tradition. But actually it's a fact. Suppose you help a person, or you send $100 donation, maybe to help a charity that is happening, that is done some other country when there is a tsunami or natural calamity, and you try to help that cause. You want to financially help in a noble venture. When you do that, we feel a little peace of mind. We try to help a man to cross the street, maybe a blind man trying to cross the street, you go and help him. Any noble activity can produce a kind of invisible spiritual asset, spiritual energy. Now, Vedanta tells us that if we continue doing good things at the physical level, it can change our mind. This is something very interesting. Modern psychology doesn't accept that. But in modern psychology clinics, they call it work therapy. So a man suffering from maybe bipolar problems, manic energy, he'll be asked to do a lot of work. But if he's asked to do certain good things, those good actions, even if done without full awareness, can generate a kind of spiritual asset. It may not be immediately felt, but it produces a kind of spiritual asset. And that can slowly turn our mind into our best friend. That's why in Vedanta, there is a Vedanta yoga also. Perfection or knowledge, truth is not attained, created, or refined. It is not vigaryam, mapyam, samskaryam, utpadyam, like that. It's Vedantic terminology. I'm not going to details into. So, our true nature is our own real spiritual home. It's not coming from outside. And this friendly mind, this true nature that we are Atman from a Vedantic perspective, is not a new knowledge, it's our true nature. This is explained in a more practical manner in one of the sutras, in the Yoga Sutra, in Kaivalyapada. The sutra is very well known. Nimittam aprayojagam pragadinam varana bhedastu tata kshetriyavat. This is an interesting sutra because Patanjali doesn't normally use analogies or graphic descriptions. So here an example is taken, let's say, from a farmer who is trying to irrigate a field. So there's a river or a pond nearby. He's bringing water. So what he's doing is, he's not cutting a canal. He's removing the unnecessary soil or sand from that part of the earth where the canal is cut. Another example is given in the Yoga Bhashya Vartika, Tattwamayananda and other books. That is another interesting example. Suppose you are asked to build a statue, a Buddha statue, for example. A granite stone, granite piece, a granite block is given to you for a sculpture. And when you are trying to build a statue, what you are doing is you are removing, chiseling out all unnecessary parts from the granite block. The result is Buddha emerges from that granite block. Why? Because you're removing all unnecessary parts. Now that brings us to another very interesting topic in Vedanta. That is with regard to food that we give to our mind. We know very well that if we drink ditch water, we'll fall sick, we may die. But if we eat bad food mentally, if we feed our own mind with toxic food, we fall sick. Anxiety, neurosis, depression, bipolar, different manifestations of abnormality. As a result of feeding our own mind with toxic, poisonous food. And that we don't remember. Yoga and Vedanta both agree on yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Parigriha, Shaucha, Santosha, Tapaswadhyaya, Sabridhana. So, to create a friendly mind, be the first step in spiritual life or in Vedantic wisdom, what we must do is, we must take care of the food that we give to our mind. We normally take care of the food that we eat, but we don't take care of the food that we feed our mind with. So good ideas, good thoughts, good interactions, all these are great or very helpful kinds of good mental food. So mind is sometimes compared to a dog, not a very complimentary way of comparing, but frequently it's done. If you feed your dog with good food, it wags its tail, is friendly with you. If you feed your dog with thorns and stones, it may bite you. Mind also does the same thing. It's very interesting. The mind also does the same thing. When we feed our own mind the toxic food, it punishes, it hits back. How? We become anxious, worried, and then what happens is different layers are put around the mind. So what is happening is our own mind becomes our worst enemy. So befriending our mind is one important practical application of Vedanta. Say Vedantic concept of yama, niyama. Actually, it's called the third element of sadhana, chatushtaya sampatti, nitya nishti vastu veha, ikamatra phalavyoga viraga, shama, dhamma, uparadi, tidiksha, saddha, samadhanam. So included yamas and niyamas, both yamas and both the first and second disciplines of Patanjali. I can give an example. Why bad food can cause problems? Suppose you are not fully established in freedom from greed, aparigraha or asteya. Together they constitute total freedom from greed. Or ahimsa, freedom from any kind of violent tendency, violent action, violent word, violent thought, anything. So all these have got mental and also physical dimensions. Suppose a person is very greedy, and if he practices asana, pranayama, pratyahara, etc., it's just like giving a terrorist with an atomic bomb. Not a good thing to do. Because when we practice yoga or any kind of Vedantic meditative practice, it creates a lot of energy. In yoga, it generates heat. In Vedanta, it creates a lot of energy. This energy should be diverted into creative channels. So before we actually do this, we should close all the channels that open the negative direction. So himsa is closed, the channel opening to himsa is closed by practice of ahimsa. Greedy tendencies are completely blocked when we practice asteya and aparigraha, and so on. I'm not going to those details. But what it means is, in our real life, before we take up any spiritual practice, we should make our own mind ready. And the best way to do that is always engage in some creative, constructive activity. This is a very important idea from Vedanta. You don't find it anywhere else. Because in Vedantic tradition, God is not somebody sitting above the clouds. God is the inherent, our own entity, Sarva Antaryami and Sarva Vyapi. It is present everywhere, in everything. This is our idea of God. You can just imagine the Vedantic concept of devotion, for example. In the Bhagavata Purana, there is Nimi Navayogi Samvada. So, Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashyet Bhagavad Bhavamatmanaha Bhudani Bhagavadi Atmani Esha Bhagavadottamaha. This is a definition of an ideal devotee. Actually, Nimi Navayogi Samvada is in the Ekadasha Skandha Bhagavata Purana. It's all about Vedanta. Bhakti is mentioned, how to do Hari Bhajanam in Kali Yuga, how to worship, but it's mentioned. But the main central theme of Nimi Navayogi Samvada is Vedanta, an application of Vedanta. So, Kavir Hari Andariksha Prabhuddha Pipalayana Avir Hotrota Dumilas Chamasa Kara Bhajanaha. These 9 Navayogis one day come to a great philosopher king, Nimi, like Janaka or maybe Platonian concept of philosopher king. And Nimi puts one question each to each one of these 9 yogis. Kavir, Kari, Andariksha, Prabhuddha, Pipalayana, Avihotra, Drumila, Chamasa, Karabhajana. One question that is asked by Nimi to Andariksha is, who is the highest devotee? It is very Vedantic interpretation of the highest devotee. Who is the highest devotee? One may expect Andariksha. He says, somebody goes to temple every day is an ideal devotee. Who does puja every day? Or maybe reading scriptures every day. No, that's not the definition. So, Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashyet Bhagavad Bhavamatmanaha Bhudani Bhagavadi Atmani Esha Bhagavadottamaha. Who is the Bhagavadanam Uttamaha? The highest devotee of God is a person who sees God in everything and everywhere, and who sees everyone in God. So Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashyet Bhagavad Bhavamatmanaha. Somebody who sees the presence of the divine Bhagavan in every living being, and the presence of every living being in God. Now, this is the Vedantic concept of devotion. And it's got a practical application. All the great ideas that you find in Vedantic tradition, Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, all these, the whole humanity is one spiritual family. Unity and oneness of existence and creation humanity. It's all based on this kind of unity, the spiritual unity and oneness of existence. So, Vedanta on one hand, it gives a very practical application. On the other hand, that is the realistic application. On the other hand, it also has the highest ideal. Realism alone or practicality, pragmatism alone can reduce us to monsters. Idealism can leave us in a kind of utopian world. So Vedanta is a harmony of the most exalted idealism and also the most practical realism. To give an example, again yoga, Yoga Sutra is called, it has got a close connection with Vedanta. Shankaracharya accepts Ashtanga Yoga as a means to attain Chitta Shuddhi. So Karmanisthaya Chitta Shuddhi Dwarena Purushartha Hedutvam Na Swatantrena Jnana Nisthatu Swatantrena Purushartha Heduku Anyan Apeksha. So Karma Nishtha includes Yoga Nishtha. Yoga helps you to establish yourself in Karma Nishtha. It can take you up to Chitta Shuddhi. So indirectly, not directly, Na Swatantrena, it can help you to Jnana Prapti and Moksha. So Yoga Sutra again gives another very important clue to practical application. Parinama tapa samskara dukkaihi guna vritti visheshacha dukkhame virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. So those who are highly evolved, called vivekinaha, everything in this empirical world is dukkha. Dukkha should not be misunderstood as grief. That's a literal translation you find in Apte or Moni Williams dictionary. Dukkha in Buddhist tradition means a sense of incompleteness or imperfection and the consequent urge for something more complete and transcendental. So this sutra tells you that if you can have worry about something higher, something noble, it is a very wonderful way of sublimating our natural feeling of incompleteness or imperfection in this world. People are always complaining about something. They complain about lack of money, lack of many other things. Very often, the complaint may not be fully justified, not genuine. Complaint may be due to greed to unnecessary anxiety. So, this sutra, which has got a very wonderful Vedantic interpretation in the Vivarana. Vivarana is a commentary by Shankaracharya on Vyasa Bhashya. Munitrayam in yoga tradition is Vyasa is the Sutragara, Patanjali is, Patanjali is the Sutragara, Vyasa is the Bhashyagara, and Shankara is the Vivaranagara. Sastve Patanjali Vyasam Shankaram Chamunitrayam Katra Sutrasya Bhashya Kraman Vivaranasya. So Vivarana commentary of Shankaracharya Vyasa Bhashya says the Parinama Dukkha is something that everyone should aspire for. I mean, learn to worry about something higher. Learn to complain about something higher. It's a very interesting thing. Our mind always looks for some problems. Even the richest man has problems. The most successful man has got problems. A person may become a trillionaire, but he's not necessarily happy. His mind is not always very friendly with him. So the problem is, he has a problem. Everyone has a problem of worry. So the worry should be given a promotion. Sublimate our worries. So a worry should be about something higher, something transcendental, something which means transformative. Parinama Dukkha it is called. Bhashya and Vyasa Bhashya says, Yoginam eva Krishnadi. This kind of, Dukkham eva Sarvam Vivekinaha. For an exalted person, for a noble-minded person, for a person of proper discrimination, this entire world is one way or other imperfect. It doesn't mean filled with grief or sorrow. That's a norm. Unfortunately, that's a translation. Actually, it means imperfection or incompleteness. For a highly evolved person, everything in this world suffers from some problem of imperfection or incompleteness. So, Vivaranagara says, that is one Bhashya Vivarana written by Shankaracharya in Yoga Sutra, he says, one should try to aspire for some transformative, transcendental worry. We worry about everything, let's worry about something higher. So that higher worry will drive away all lower worries. If you are caught by the lower worries, there is no end. So this can be done by the practice of detachment. I mentioned earlier, Saktaha, Karmanya, Vidvamsa, etc. This is in many ways, so dharma, so karma, and so on, I don't want to go beyond that. When we practice non-attachment, what happens is, it helps us to conserve our energy. Sometimes it's compared, suppose you have a huge weight on your head, huge box, but there is 1 millimeter gap between your hairline and the top and the bottom of the box. You're carrying a big box of granite stone on your head, but the granite stone doesn't touch your hairline. There is 1 millimeter gap. Then you don't feel any strain. If the granite stone sits on your hairline, you feel the weight. But suppose it doesn't sit on your head, there is 1 millimeter gap between the hairline and the bottom of the granite stone. You don't feel that heavy weight. Now, detachment is the art of practicing this gap, keeping a gap between the weight of our duties and responsibilities and the worries and anxiety that normally go along with that. Every problem has a problem, as you mentioned, and no one can remain quiet physically and mentally all the time. Nahi kasit kshanamabi jadu tishtati akarma krita. Karidehi avashak karma sarva prakriti gunaihi. No one can keep quiet without doing anything mentally and physically all the time. You have to be active. Even you're sitting in an armchair, relaxing, your mind will be hyperactive. So there is no question of inaction at the mental level and the physical level at the same time. So we have to do things. But if you do things in modern world, it always problematic in the sense some worries, anxieties, always worrying about the results while doing things, and then either depression or over joy, too much of joy and happiness when the results are beyond expectation. The results are beyond expectation, you become overjoyed. The results are below expectation, we become depressed or disappointed. This is the price you have to pay. Now, Vedanta tells you that you need not necessarily feel depression when the results are not up to expectations. Why? Because we practice detachment. So if you don't practice detachment, what happens is every bit of activity can be a prison, can be a trap, can be a precipice. It can get us entangled, it can get us entrapped. So when we practice non-attachment or detachment, we can do everything but same time feel free. You know, Gita says, "Sa buddhiman manusheshu sa yukta Krishna karma karta." Buddhiman yuktaha Krishna karma karta. The intelligent man of spiritual wisdom, of Vedantic wisdom, he does everything, but he does everything as a yogi, yukta. I should conclude by giving one or two practical illustrations. It's a great mystery. Have we thought of a man like Shankaracharya? 6 years old. He started his missionary work 6 years. Now, look at what he has achieved. 8th century AD, long before the land route in Indian subcontinent was ever ready. No one could walk. He walked 1300 miles, roughly about 2000 kilometers, from his native place to Indore, in one bank of Narmada, and met his Guru and began his campaign. 10 monastic orders. Remember, think of other founders of monastic orders. Ignatius Loyola, Jesuit order. Saint Dominic, Dominican order. Saint Francis, Franciscan order. Shankara, 10 monastic orders. We still continue to flourish. 4 monasteries. Kanchi included 5 monasteries. The most profound spiritual classics in Sanskrit language. Not only that, the most moving devotional poetry in Sanskrit language. According to literary critics, if Shankaracharya had not written those bhashyas, he would have ranked as the greatest poet in Sanskrit far above Kalidasa. Because in bhashyas also, his status as a poet was not very much recognized. Again, debates with scholars and others, rival schools of non-Vedic schools of Vedanta, of Indian tradition, Buddhism, Sautrantika, Vaibhasya, Vijnanavadin, Sunyavadin, Prabhakara Mimamsa, Bhatta Mimamsa, Vrittikara, Upavasha, Bodhayana, all different types of Vrittikaras. And then 4 times traveling all over Indian subcontinent. If you go to Tripureswari temple in Tripura, they have the traditional Shankaracharya coming to Tripureswari Mandi. We go to Afghanistan, they have found Shankaracharya's, some statues they excavated long before. It is at much earlier origin than Bamiyan Buddha statues were destroyed by the Taliban. This is in the maybe 1990s perhaps now. Now, and how long did he live? 32 years. And we still continue. Vedas never had a philosophy. Before he extracted in his mind These 10 Upanishads mentally, I wrote bhashyas on that. In fact, the Upanishads were not clearly distinguished a separate body of books before Shankara. Bhagavad Gita, 145 verses, that is some kind of a non-authentic version of Mahabharata, but the standardized version of Mahabharata has got more than 1,100,000 verses. He detached 700 verses of Gita and wrote a commentary. We used to read Bhagavad Gita because of his commentary. So you can imagine. And then the way we worship in our temples, Adityam, Bhagam, Krishnam, Gananatham, Maheshwaram, Panja, Yajna, Bharo, Nityam, Grihastha, Panja Puji. If our householders today in their homes practice Devi Puja, Krishna Puja, Kumara Puja, because Panja Devata Puja. Just imagine, 32 years. How could he do so much? Because he did everything, but he never felt he was doing anything. This is the art of non-attachment. Swami Vivekananda, he went to America in 1893 and 1902 he passed away. Total missionary work for 9-10 years. Of course, he had prepared much earlier. So how could these great men do so much? And because what happens is, when we actually work in this world, thinking that we are not just body-mind complexes, we are a higher divine entity for which body is only an instrument. It means what happens? We don't feel any fatigue. We don't feel any tired. Physically we will be, of course, we affect Pancha Mahabhutas will be subject to rules and regulations of nature. But mind never gets tired. So Vedanta has got a very practical application. It is simple common sense. Vedanta, of course, Advaita Vedanta, any Vedanta in Ramanuja tradition is a great system of philosophy. Ramanuja is a great devotee. Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha, Chaitanya, all of them. But the point is, Vedanta is not just a abstract philosophy. In the Vedanta, in broader category, includes all the 7 schools. We got commentary on Brahma Sutras. All Vedantic schools represent, on the one hand, the highest truth enshrined in these philosophical canonical works, but they also represent the most common practical wisdom. It has got another application, simple spiritual common sense. So I think it's about time for me to stop. We have arati right now. So I was trying to share some of my thoughts on this subject with you. And I feel very happy to be back in the place where I started my own monastic career. And thank you so much. Thank you, Swamiji, for inviting me to share my thoughts with you all. Thank you. Namaste. Shanti, 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat, Sri Ramakrishna-Arpanamastu.